From those small choices, a billion-year migration from flesh to engineered minds unfolded. To see how, we start in the decade you still control. The initial stake, your last natural decade. Right now, upgrades arrive softly, a wristband that nudges your focus, an app that listens for burnout and writes your emails anyway. Your doctor offers a longevity stack with a clinical shrug. Senolytics, microdose Rapalogs, sleep-driven epigenetic resets. The price is a subscription and a baseline scan. It feels elective, like a better gym membership. Then work changes. Your teammate thinks, with a licensed model tethered to her notes and her nerve signals. She drafts multi-quarter strategies in minutes because her attention filter strips noise before it reaches awareness. In the weekly review, you're still composing, she's orchestrating. The gap compounds. HR calls it enablement. It's a choice until it isn't. Admissions offices quietly revise rubrics. Students who show cognitive hygiene, verified assistive tools, certified study agents, get flagged as low-risk admits. Insurers mirror the trend. Premiums bend for augmented cognition safety profiles. Rent a cognition bundle, and your job prospects, your mortgage rate, and your visa renewal all smooth out. Opt out, and the world adds friction to everything you touch. Friends start saying things like, "I don't remember that meeting, hold on." They blink into a recall overlay and play back the scene from their perspective. Crisp audio, timestamps, social cues highlighted. You remember the feeling, they remember the file. At first, it's annoying, then disorienting, then useful. Arguments shrink. Creativity spikes, if you can afford the better packages. A breach jolts the culture. One Friday, neural ransomware locks thousands of users out of their executive functions for 13 minutes. No permanent harm, regulators say, but for 13 minutes, people can't choose to stand or speak. A few cry, a few laugh later. Everyone updates. New standards arrive like seatbelts after the first highway pileup. Mandatory encryption, attestation chips, safety certifications stamped into every neural app. With standards come edge cases. A gig worker loses access to her certified attention filter after a late payment and drifts during a forklift shift. The liability lands on her because her cognitive safety lapsed. The warehouse updates procurement, only certified minds on the floor. A hospital follows. A school district pilot requires cognition packages during exams to reduce variance. It sounds like fairness, it functions like a gate. At dinner, your father asks if renting thought makes it less yours. Your sister shrugs. Everyone rents their apartment in a hurricane zone. This is just risk management. She's not wrong, but something subtle moves. The law starts codifying safe cognition the way it codified seatbelts, smoke detectors, vaccines. That's when a phrase appears in policy drafts and corporate memos, the recognition date. It's not announced on a stage. It's buried in timelines for compliance. The day unaugmented cognition loses default access in critical sectors unless accompanied by a certified safety layer. It's framed as protection, it's sold as inclusion, it starts the clock on your last natural decade, the commitment hook, the revelation promise. Here's the sharper truth. The line between human and machine doesn't disappear because silicon gets good. It disappears because policy decides what counts as a person you can insure, hire, and trust. The pivot is boring on purpose. Regulatory language, liability tables, procurement checklists, but it's a blade that cuts while looking like paperwork. Behind the blade sits a consortium that learned to price risk better than anyone. Global reinsurers tied to state regulators and the platforms that run your cognitive tools. They already price storms, pandemics, supply chains. Next, they price minds. Your baseline cognition becomes a risk factor, a certified package.
Lowers correlated error, reduces behavioral variance, and plugs into audit trails. That's not a sci-fi prophecy. It's how markets shave tail risk. Silently, by changing what gets financed. They propose a standard. It looks like any ISO certification, except it reaches into thought. Calls it cognitive safety level, CSL, graded from local-only assist to full-stack, cloud-backed, real-time error correction. Claims are simple. Fewer accidents, better compliance, fairer outcomes. The demos are convincing. The actuarial curves slope the right way.
Legislators trying to reduce workplace injuries, biased decisions, and cyber exposure see a lever that costs them no new taxes. The public hears harm reduction. The employers hear safe harbor. The insurers hear predictable portfolios. Nobody hears the latch click. Now the pricing flips the culture. Unaugmented minds aren't illegal. They're expensive. A bank can't justify unsecured human-only decision pipelines. A hospital can't clear an OR without certified attention buffers. A drone licensing agency won't accept pilots who can't produce a CSL token. The old accommodations reverse. You can stink to level lessons. On a Wednesday afternoon that doesn't look historic, the first country adopts the standard across critical infrastructure. It isn't the one you think, neither the flashiest nor the freest. It's a mid-sized, trade-exposed state that lives or dies by insurance ratings and capital flows. Overnight, its ports, grids, hospitals, and airspace require CSL compliance. No demonstrations, no slogans, just a compliance state that logistics firms can't ignore. Your cousin texts from the ER parking lot. Badge won't open. CSL token expired. I can chart, but can't enter the ward. She's calm about it. She pays the renewal. She goes back in. 5 years later, the holdouts fold. Not from ideology, from cost. Their airlines can't land in compliant airspace without higher premiums. Their chips don't get procured cured. Their universities lose accreditation for clinical programs. The network effect doesn't argue, it prices. By then, the recognition date has a calendar emoji in your HR portal. You sign new hire paperwork and a checkbox appears. CSL attestation on file. If you tap later, the training videos won't play. Meanwhile, the consortium's dashboards glow with a new product line. Risk-scored cognition. VTMs, variance-tolerant minds, pay more. Certified minds pay less. Appeals exist, but behind every appeal sits a graph that says, we can predict your error bars. We design for the median. The trap feels like convenience. Your commute discount requires a live attention buffer. Your kid's field trip permission form asks for a CSL token so the museum can admit volunteers. Your mortgage autopay offers 10 BPS off if you enable decision provenance. You don't notice the hinge, you notice the savings. This is the moment your categories start to blur. If your thought runs through a certified model before you act, whose thought is it? If law says the action is yours, but the model shaped it, who's liable when it fails? Insurers offer combined coverage, human plus model policies, bundled with audit tools that log the chain of intention. Privacy advocates protest. Parents ask about exams. Pilots ask about edge cases. The answers come in white papers, then in defaults. On the recognition date, your city's transit app quietly adds CSL required to operate e-bikes over 15 miles per hour. You tap accept to get to work. They didn't know it then, but this was the turn. Not a singularity, a standard. Not a breakthrough, a procurement policy. It felt inevitable because it arrived as favors. Cheaper premiums, faster lines, doors that opened. Until they didn't, unless you carried the token. To understand why it felt inevitable, you have to go back to the first merges, to the moment nerves touched code and never fully let go. The final bridge, why this backstory matters now. This isn't a far horizon problem. The defaults are being set while the upgrades still feel like toys. Safety modes you toggle today are the firmware of tomorrow's cognition. Companies are already building logs for assist provenance, and regulators love anything they can audit. That means the first drafts of how thought is supervised are getting locked into platforms, contracts, and norms, long before courts and parliaments can argue philosophy. Waiting feels neutral, but it isn't. Platforms harden with use. What you don't specify becomes the silent setting for your kids. Once a city procures tools that require CSL tokens, reversing them is like ripping out roads. The people who ship the SDKs decide which values are one click away and which require a lawyer. This is the bridge. Once nerves plug into code, the incentives don't let go. From here, everything runs through the interface, and the interface is where policy hides. To see why our category slid, you need to meet.
The first generation that wore the wire by choice. The first merge. Neural interfaces go mainstream. It started in hospitals. A surgeon lifts a stylus in an OR and scrolls a patient's motor cortex like a map. A man who hasn't moved a hand in 6 years closes his fingers around his daughter's wrist. The video goes viral, not for the science, for the look on his face when sensation almost returns. Clinics fill wait lists. Funding follows the tears. Engineers hate single-use miracles. Generalize, if a chip can read motor intent and write stimulation,
It can do other jobs. Filter distraction, tag memories at the moment of formation, smooth stuttered speech into clean text. The first consumer pilots are clunky headbands with dry electrodes and a subscription app that swears it can see your focus. Half placebo, half breakthrough, but it sells. Then a quieter shift. The corporate pilot. A logistics giant hands out behind-the-ear patches that sync with an attention model trained on task flow. The tech isn't reading thoughts, it's reading rhythms, micro-pauses, saccades, breath. The patch nudges timing, flags overload, routes help. Metrics improve. A safety officer writes the memo. 22% fewer incidents, measurable reduction in judgment drift on hour 7. Procurement asks for scale. An app store grows, half wellness, half workflow. You buy an attention filter that lowers the volume on irrelevant stimuli at the edge. Before awareness, you install a recall layer that can resurrect what you saw at 3:12 p.m. with context. You run a math coprocessor that pairs your problem framing with a model's derivations, then writes a step-by-step you can defend in a meeting. It feels like glasses for the mind. Take them off and the world blurs. Culture splits. Offline romantics throw parties where phones die at the door, and an EMT student carries a Faraday pouch for the brave. The always optimized crowd measures deep work minutes and jokes about dopamine budgets, the way old managers joked about coffee. In one office, a joke becomes a policy. Tuesdays are unaugmented. Productivity drops, the policy dies. Then something breaks. A mid-tier vendor ships an update that passes certification, but hides a dependency mistake. An attacker exploits a field debug port left open on a batch of patches. At 10:17 a.m., in 3 cities, 1,000 users lose write access to voluntary action. 13 minutes of baffled stillness. One driver steps on a brake out of habit before his motor program won't update. A cashier stares at an error dialogue only she can see. A teacher hums to fill a silence that won't yield to words. Afterward, logs show no tissue harm. Regulators say the quiet part out loud. We were lucky. Neurosecurity becomes a word. Standards rush in. Encrypt at the electrode. Rotate keys with biometric attestation. Air-gap clinical programming. Demand third-party proofs for firmware. Devices carry tamper-evident seals you only notice when they're missing. A new profession appears. Cognitive safety engineers, half InfoSec, half neurophysiology. They audit models for failure cascades, like firefighters reading buildings. The first lawsuit lands. A forklift operator's attention filter lapses after a billing error, and a pallet clips a corner. No injuries, minor damage. The company denies the claim. The insurer cites user negligence. The worker's attorney points to a clause. Safety critical augmentation must fail safe. A judge stares at the language for long minutes, then asks a question nobody wants to answer. Is a person without the filter unsafe by default now? The court punts on the philosophy and rules on billing. The procurement department quietly updates contracts, certified minds only. Education shifts. In a high school biology exam, a pilot program lets students use a CSL1 study agent that explains but won't answer. Grades rise. Variance shrinks. A superintendent says it levels the field. A parent group claims it teaches dependency. The kids shrug. They've been collaborating with code for years. Colleges adapt faster than they admit. A dean whispers that accreditation bodies like anything that reduces subjective drift. They call it rigor. Students call it orchestration. Meanwhile, the medical side keeps advancing. A trial for aphasia patients pairs microstimulation with language models tuned to the patient's voice. The output is uncanny. Not perfect, but familiar enough that spouses cry. A fighter pilot testbed uses thin film arrays to give vestibular corrections that let trainees fly longer without nausea. A construction firm rolls out microhaptics that warn of load shifts before eyes can register movement. Each use case feels sensible, bounded, humane. The boundary between medical and elective erodes the way contact lenses blurred medicine and fashion. Devices that started as clinical lifelines become performance edges. An athlete's rehab sleeve becomes recovery optimization. A coder's carpal tunnel.
Treatment becomes gesture acceleration. Insurance covers some, employers cover others, and a mass market grows around the gaps. The breach leaves a scar, though, and it shapes law. A national commission issues a framework that reads like food safety for cognition, labels for latency, right access permissions, provenance guarantees, red lines, no subliminal persuasion channels, No covert right-to-reward pathways, no cross-context data without explicit consent. Activists point out the obvious. Consent dialogues, once ubiquitous, became wallpaper years ago. So enforcement moves to certification. You don't run uncertified neural apps in regulated environments because nobody will insure you if you do. Meanwhile, something else was happening. The app ecosystem converges with workplace platforms. The Neural SDK ships with default hooks into CRMs, EHRs, cockpit software. Audit trails snap into place, not because of ethics, because of compliance. You can now trace a decision from the nudge that shaped attention to the model that drafted the order to the human who approved it. It's neat, it's defensible, it's sticky. This is the moment everything changed, and it didn't feel like a change. It felt like the path of least resistance. People who opted in got calmer mornings, clearer meetings, safer shifts. People who didn't felt like they were swimming against current. The first merge wasn't a headset in your skull. It was the slow agreement that thoughts could be instrumented, and instrumented thoughts could be made safer. What nobody knew at the time was that the safety labels would become passports. The certifications, born from a breach, would turn into the keys that open classrooms, jobs, and airspace. The lever for personhood access wasn't a manifesto. It was a checkbox next to CSL compliant, added to a procurement form by someone who needed to make a deadline. Editing the body, germline, and longevity arms race. To understand why cognition got standardized, watch what happened to the body. The first edits were humble. Somatic fixes for blood disorders, eye diseases, aggressive cancers. A toddler walks because a base editor corrected a single letter in a gene. A patient's marrow stops producing sickled cells after an in vivo treatment. News anchors say miracle, clinicians say protocol. It builds trust in the tool. Clinics that once offered IVF now add a glass corridor in a clean room. The sign changes from fertility to licensed enhancement. On the brochure, everything is framed as prevention. Remove disease risks, reduce fragile X repeats, stabilize tumor suppressors. Parents sit with counselors who slide probability charts across a desk. Most choose the safe path. Some ask about extras, height distributions, myopia corrections, metabolic profiles tuned for modern diets. The counselor says, "We don't do that here," and circles back to disease. Across a border, someone does. Policy lags, so practice moves. Embryo screening had already normalized selection. Editing feels like the next dial. In one city, a court rules that edits with established clinical benefit can proceed within formal trials. In another, a ministry bans germline interventions, but permits research on non-viable embryos. The market draws a map. Jurisdictions with clear liability attract the cautious. Free ports attract the bold. Companies bundle legal passage with care. Plan A, screen. Plan B, edit. Plan C, find a clinic whose ethics board signs faster. Meanwhile, longevity stops being a fringe. Clinics stack senolytics with metabolic modulators and periodic immunoresets. A mid-career patient takes a sabbatical, runs 3 cycles, and comes back with biomarkers that look a decade younger. Organ printing moves from lab demo to supply chain. A banked liver patch ends a transplant waitlist that used to haunt entire families. Hair grays, then grays slower. People notice when their boss's boss still out-hikes them at 65. The new inequality arrives quietly. If you extend health span by 20 years, you don't just get more life, you get more compound returns. An investor who avoids a decade of cognitive decline anchors boards longer. A mayor with endurance wins again, then again. The ladder stretches. A phrase enters politics. Temporal capital. Age becomes less about years lived and more about edits applied. The old age pyramid starts to invert at the top. Parents face a different edge. If cognitive scaffolding is becoming standard, do you edit for a brain that learns faster? Officially, clinics refuse enhancement. Unofficially, parameters that reduce neurodevelopmental variance become popular. A child grows up with fewer spikes in attention, fewer troughs in mood. In a classroom that rewards cognitive hygiene, that child looks like a natural. At dinner, someone says it out loud. Did we handicap our kid by waiting? Nations respond like markets. A block builds enhancement corridors, visa fast lanes for edited graduates whose certifications match local standards. Another block leans into bioconservatism, writes rights charters for the unedited, and invests in subsidies to keep them competitive. In practice, capital chooses the path of least friction. Universities partner with licensed centers abroad, then lobby to harmonize.
An athlete publishes a memoir about the line between therapy and edge. A scandal erupts. The league updates medical disclosures. Fandom moves on. A micro-story makes it feel personal. A young couple in a cramped apartment holds a printout with 3 embryo profiles. Column 1, no edits, standard screening. Column 2, edit, to remove a disease that runs on her side. Column 3, add a low-variance learning profile under a trial in another country. He worries about immigration. Will their kid be flagged without the right certifications? She worries about regret. How do you explain to a future child that you could have prevented something and didn't? They fight, cry, sign Form 2. On the train home, she Googles the clinic across the border, then closes the tab. Meanwhile, the insurer-regulator axis watches the numbers. Fewer NICU days, fewer catastrophic pediatric diagnoses, fewer early-onset cancers in edited cohorts. Actuarial curve shift, premiums reflected. A health plan quietly pilots a discount for edited embryos delivered within the network. The press asks if that's eugenics. The CFO says it's math. Both can be true, the policy remains. Longevity brings governance headaches. If retirement ages don't move, tax bases crack. If they do, social contracts strain. Companies experiment with clock bands, roll expectations pegged to proven health span capacity. A 90-year-old chief scientist with a refreshed hippocampus mentors 4 40-year-olds and still files patents. The 40-year-olds form a union around advancement tempo. The company offers sabbatical cycles for edits as a benefit. Talent follows. Bio-nationalism hardens. Passport stamps now include enhancement status because some jurisdictions tie liability to predicted medical needs in public spaces. There are outrage cycles, then quiet compliance. Controversies about fairness get folded into procurement. A research hospital requires edited compatible protocols to join a multi-center trial. An unedited cohort can't meet inclusion criteria. Nobody banned them, the standard drifted past them. Longer, healthier lives demand faster learning. A surgeon with a 70-year career will relearn tools 7 times. A coder will retool every year. Human rehearsal starts to look wasteful. Cognitive outsourcing, which seemed like a workplace perk, becomes the bridge. Edited bodies create the time. Rented cognition fills it. Families who invested in germline stability now rent, thought to stretch opportunity across the added decades. The arms race, once about cells, pushes minds toward the interface. Cognitive outsourcing, renting thought.